Is it? Huh? You have to engage. Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. So, as you know, today is World Mental Health Day, and the theme for this year is mental health is a universal human right, right? So, I have chosen to talk about depression in children primarily because children are often overlooked, right? So, adults have the ability to, seek help when they need to by themselves. But unfortunately, in the case of children, if parents don't recognize that there is something going on with them, they often don't receive the help that they need. So the goal of this discussion, right, is to equip parents to recognize if there are any symptoms of depression in your child, so that you can get them timely help, right? So one of the things that we often come across is, can a child go through depression in the first place, right? Because we often feel, what is the need for a child to be depressed, right? Or they have everything, they're still small, they're not going through things, then, why depression for a child, right? So this concept is not even considered very often. But unfortunately, the statistics show that children also suffer from severe depression. In fact, 1 out of 4 children are diagnosed with depression, right? Even young children, including preschoolers, can suffer from depression. However, depression looks different in children than in adults, right? So until and unless you know what signs to look out for, you may not recognize if your child could be going through that. So I'm going to focus on the signs and symptoms to look out for, and following that, I will also explain to you what are the possible reasons why this could be happening with children. Right? So one of the things that you would see is the emotional symptoms, right? So that includes experiencing anxiety, right? Some children, you would see that they get tense, they get panicky, they become clingy to their parents, right? Um, they become sad and hopeless, right? You might see them withdrawing from people, spending more time by themselves, crying more often, or, trying to hide their tears and crying by themselves, right? You would see that they're losing interest in activities that they like to do, right? So they say they are bored of it, they don't seem to enjoy it anymore, so they stopped doing the things that they used to enjoy before, right? You would also see that sometimes children are more angry and irritable, right? So it can be for small things, right? You would see them reacting or becoming upset more often than before, right? So these are some of the emotional signs that you can see if your child might be going through depression, right? Now coming to behavioral symptoms, right? You can notice that the child is restless, withdrawing themselves, right? Sometimes overdoing certain things, right, which is unusual of them, right? You might sometimes notice that they are harming themselves, right? For example, making cuts on their hands or their thighs, right? Or they become very needy, right? So you might see that they reaching out to you more often than before, right? They sort of want you to be around, or not doing things so much by themselves, right? So these kind of behavioral changes also you will be able to experience in the children, or you might see in them, right? Then we also have certain cognitive signs that we can notice, right? So, what do they include? Um, you might notice that they are not able to really organize their thoughts, right? So, when they're talking to you or trying to tell you something, right, they're not really having a flow, right? They're going here and there, right? They're not able to articulate what it is that they have in mind, right? You would notice that they are having a negative attitude towards things, right? They everything that they talk about, or they do, there is a underlying pessimism, right, associated with it, right? Not so much of positivity in the things that they say, right? You might see that they are feeling guilty and worthless, right? So you might notice statements like, they're not good enough, right? And they're feeling overly guilty about things, right? If something goes wrong, they tend to feel that it's because of them, right? Even though it's not exactly their fault, right? So a lot of guilt, a lot of worthlessness, feeling that people don't love them, they're not good enough to do things, right? You might also notice any suicidal thoughts, right? Sometimes children, directly or indirectly, indicate that. For example, they might make statements like, the family would be better if, they were not there, or things would be better, if they would just go away, right? Sometimes children might not say anything. You might notice they've written these kind of things in their notes, or if they have a journal, or something like that. You might notice more written stuff also in children. They don't always articulate regarding suicidal thoughts. So these are the kind of cognitive symptoms that you will notice in children, right? You will also notice physical symptoms, right? So the physical symptoms often include becoming very distressed, right? You would notice disturbances in their sleep. They have difficulty sleeping, right? There would be changes in their appetite. You would notice that sometimes they might be eating more than usual, or they might complain of not feeling hungry, right? They might avoid meals, or the quantity that they consume might significantly reduce, right? You might notice that they're being lazy and, sort of slow in everything that they do, right? Seem very disinterested, right? Um, so these are the what do you say? The physical symptoms that you would often notice if children are going through depression, right? Now, why do children go through depression, right? It's similar like that as of adults, right? You would see there are biological factors that can lead to it. There can be social factors that lead to it, psychological factors that lead to it, right? And it's not always that you have to necessarily identify there is some big problem as such as well, right? And which is also why sometimes it often goes missed. So the symptoms that we discussed, that's usually what we see. However, it'll be different from child to child, and every child may not exhibit symptoms also. There are few, in few cases you might not notice any of this, right? The child might be functioning well, going to school, doing all of this, right, all of the things that they're supposed to do, but silently suffering, right? This becomes even more difficult to identify unless you have a very close relationship with your child and the child is, open about how they feel towards you. Now we will just briefly go over what are the possible reasons why this happens, right? So one of the thing is physical factors are there, right? So or so if they're having any chronic health issues, right, any other health conditions that they're going through, because of which, their normal day-to-day life is in disturbed, or they're not able or allowed to do the things that other kids might be doing, right? Or they go through some severe injury, or certain issues like thyroid, right? These are some of things that put them at risk, right? You have biological factors, right, like a genetic vulnerability. So for example, if you have depression or any mental health issues running in your family, right, especially within your close relatives, right, that means your child would be more susceptible to the condition, right? Then there are environmental factors, right? So environmental factors include, dysfunctional family environment, right? Very critical parents, right? Often putting the child down, comparing the child to other children, right? Or being neglected or unloved by parents, right? These include risk factors for depression, right? Social factors are there, right? Especially their interpersonal relationships, right, at school with other children, right? Especially if they are going through bullying, or being left out from their peer group for any reason, right? This also becomes a huge risk factors, right? You have psychological factors, right, which includes any other mental health related issues, or going through a lot of stress due to any reason, right? Children who also lack self confidence, right, they are also at a higher risk for developing depression, right? Then other things, right, include things like parents getting separated, or sometimes moving, right, from one place to a new place. The child might have difficulty adjusting to the uh, new place, new school, difficulty fitting in, things like that, right? Then sexual abuse is a very, very common reason, right? Children, when they go through sexual abuse, you would notice that they tend to develop depression. Now, this becomes very crucial because in majority of the cases, parents are unaware of the abuse that has happened, right? Children don't usually come up and talk about it, right? For various reasons, right? But the rate of sexual abuse also happening is extremely high, right? So that is also a huge risk factor for children developing depression, right? So so we've just briefly gone over, right, what are the signs and symptoms to look for to identify if your child could be going through depression. In case you notice something like this in your child, right, please do take them to a professional and get them evaluated, right? Don't think that it is just part of their normal growing up or teenage, or just them being rebellious or lazy, right? But if you notice there is a sudden change in their behavior, their mood, right, in the things that they are saying, then please do get them evaluated, right? Because depression is a very treatable condition, right? So the earlier we recognize, the earlier we provide children with the help, right, then they would benefit from that, right? So I hope this brief talk has helped you in recognizing if your child can possibly have depression. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you very much.